Uncle Dan.
Hey.
When I go out to the park, I like to take a book to read.
You're a park-going fool is what you are.
Me, despite what the judge says, I go to parks. And I like a little reading material on a sunny day.
I never learned to read myself. Just
You know what? It's not worth it. It's just all bad news.
Yeah, I figure when it comes out as a movie, then I can enjoy it. Whatever.
That's why you express yourself through don'ts.
It's the truth. That's what I enjoy. You know what?
Doug,
I'm not the only one who never really learned to read, and I think Doug is going to talk to us a little bit about another fellow illiterate.
Yeah,
another not reader.
Well, dear uncles, in March, we all went into lockdown because of a global pandemic. A novel virus was sweeping the entire world.
I don't remember any of this.
What's that?
I don't remember any of this.
I know. Well,
it's a bit of a blur.
Partially true. The only way to avoid it was to abandon our jobs, our families, our social circles, and our normal daily lives and hide in our houses. When we had to venture out of civic duty, or at least those of us who give a shit about civic duty, we wore masks and gloves. We discarded age-old traditions like hugging and shaking hands. Even, going to bars, restaurants, concerts, and even church have been seriously disrupted, although in the latter case, not nearly enough. Tens of thousands of our fellow citizens have died alone and afraid, and their families have been denied the basic dignity of even having a funeral. Our economy has hit every iceberg not melted by global warming, and families all over our blighted nation are running out of money and hope, and there is no end in sight. In fact, in our fair state of Utah, we had our biggest spike in cases just this week. Mm-hmm. So, hooray!
It was our record number in a one-day number, right, of new infections.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's
almost every day is a new record number.
Yep.
It's fun. We get to watch records being set every single day. It's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. And yet, because this is either the worst timeline, or because the alien running our collective simulation has fallen asleep on the evil meter, the global pandemic is not even the biggest news of the day. Just about 10 days ago, a white racist piece of shit who somehow, after nearly 20 burning red flags, was still a police officer, handcuffed and knelt on the windpipe of George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and ever so slowly murdered him on camera for nearly 9 minutes. And so now our country has been further torn to shreds by protests of that murder, the inevitable violence and looting that accompanied those protests, and the state-sanctioned violence of myriad heavily armed paramilitary forces on even the most peaceful of protesters. Of course, a major cause and symptom of this rolling disaster is the incompetent, vile, and ignorant leadership that we, in our infinite wisdom, did not elect, but because of a sop to slave-owning states in the late 18th century, managed to squeak his way into the most powerful position in the world, and has managed to make all our worst fears come true. And he may very well get reelected. So many of our listeners do not live in our ever-diminishing United States of America, and I cannot imagine how disturbing and terrifying this all must look to them and the rest of the world. I have been a resident of this country my entire life, and I can barely make heads or tails of it. We never meant this to be a current events or political podcast, and we never meant this to be a dour or solemn podcast. We wanted this to be a place where people just finding their way out of religion could find community with those who had long ago made that transition, and we always meant this to be a fun and kind place for us to build that community. So in spite of the fire hose of terrible news spraying all over us from all directions like the rupturing of every sewer main in the world, we have endeavored to give you, dear listeners, a place to find refuge and provide you with 70 or 80 minutes of mediocre content to let your psyche catch its fucking breath.
Yeah.
But, of course, we've been overwhelmed with events and have been forced to speak to the unspeakable shit raining down on all of us, as Uncle Mark did in episode 131, where he broke down and cried like Nancy Kerrigan. But for the most part, we've tried in good faith, pardon that term, to mostly stay out of the politics of the day. And I was trying to do this over the past few days.
Yeah, but sometimes.
I know. And I mean, because...
Come on.
It's just so overwhelming. And I kicked around a couple ideas for today's segment, but one image just kept flashing in my mind. And it was that of Donald Trump holding up a Bible in front of a church outside the White House. I know everyone's seen this image. It's so alarming in so many ways that I couldn't get my head away from it, And I finally gave in and decided we needed to talk about it.
But the most alarming way, the biggest way that it was alarming for me was that it became so clear that he just didn't know how to hold a book.
Oh, and we'll talk about that for sure. That was the strangest part of the thing. But I want to talk very specifically about that photo op. So for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to take it as a given that there is systemic racism in the United States, that systemic racism is most acute and deadly within our over-militarized and clearly poorly trained police forces, and that white America lives and has always lived in a different reality than black America. So I don't mean to be flippant or dismissive, but, other podcasts and other people are doing great work in discussing and dissecting those issues. So given that this is a religious criticism podcast, I want to stay narrowly focused on that photo op. Obviously knowing full well that the systemic racism and police violence happening all across the country are inextricably linked to it. So
yeah, like literally in the moment they were. So
yeah.
Proceed.
Let's start off with how this specific moment came about. A full week after the murder of George Floyd, Ivanka Trump and Hope Hicks, two of the most pointless women since any female character in a Michael Mann movie, decided that Trump, stinging from having been outed for hiding in his bunker for the past several days, needed a show of force. So this lack of brain trust thought it would be a good idea for Trump to stand in front of a Christian church and hold up a Bible. The nearest church was St. John's Episcopal Church, some 900 feet away from his Twitter bunker. There was, of course, one minor problem. In the 900 or so feet between his Twitter bunker and the church was Lafayette Park, where protesters had been exercising their First Amendment rights for a week in peaceful protests against police brutality. There was an elegant solution to this problem: police brutality. And so the avatar of all of our racist relatives, William Barr, ordered that police, some on horseback, all decked out in this year's latest fascist fashion, clear the square with tear gas, rubber bullets, and billy clubs. Of course, Kayleigh McEnany, taking a much-deserved break from calling the police on black bird watchers, has made a big point that it was not tear gas, but smoke from flash grenades mixed with pepper balls. She can, of course, eat a big old bowl of shit. Trump...
She does every day.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think, and the big question for me is, that makes it better?
Yeah, it's that... Yeah. This is one of the things that is so frustrating whenever you debate someone about political issues, particularly on the right, like guns. If you want to have a discussion about guns and you misidentify the specific brand of gun or make and model used by a mass shooter, how can we even have this discussion? It's like, God damn it. Okay, that's a different story. Trump began his historic shambling across Pennsylvania Avenue and unintentionally produced what may well be the most indelible photo of his presidency, where he walked in front of a graffiti-strewn wall with several iterations of "fuck Trump" for all to see.
That was amazing.
On a public toilet, which is just, sometimes it's not the photo op you want, it's the one you get.
Exactly. It's the one we deserve.
Yeah.
He arrived at the church, and after what must have felt like the Baton Death March to him, to have Ivanka pull a Bible from her designer handbag.
He doesn't know what that was, but go on.
Yeah.
And a reporter asked him, is that your Bible? And his response was, it's a Bible. Why the fuck would you choose that moment to tell the truth for the first time in your life? Of course it's my Bible. I read it every day. This is my favorite book. Yeah. I just don't get it.
You know how to lie. It's not something you're bad at. You might as well go with that.
Yeah.
Do you know what that Bible actually is? That is the thing that Ivanka has in meetings, and when you open it, it's got a hole carved out and it's got a cheeseburger in it. So it's like, it kind of keeps him quiet during meetings.
Funny. Exactly.
Yeah.
So to your point, Dan, Trump then goes on to hold the Bible in several different awkward ways. First looking at it as though he did not know what he had been handed, then showing the spine to the reporters, the only spine Trump has ever possessed, as if to prove that this was indeed the Bible. He then shook it up and down, apparently to make sure there was not a prize or cheeseburger inside, before finally holding it up high in his right hand for several seconds.
Did you see that moment where he just was trying to figure out which way? It was like he'd just gotten a first-generation artificial arm, and he was trying to figure out which way his hand should grasp it.
Yeah.
And you could see it took every ounce of his brain power.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. It literally looked like anyone who has held a Bible before. Like, I would be able to pose with a Bible, no problem. It's such an easy thing. You just, cradle it against your chest or your abdomen, and you just stand there. It's an easy pose.
Yes. Or
you do the Billy Graham and you kind of hold it by the spine and wave it as you're talking.
Oh, sure. You could do that. You could do basically anything but the three things that he did
exactly
would look fine. But
I didn't realize that we were experts on Bible etiquette until now. But
Right?
we are, and he's not.
It's just so weird. He might as well have balanced the damn thing on his head.
I know.
Yeah.
And it just pick a lane. Hold it by your side, hold it on your chest, or hold it up. Just pick a fucking lane, you idiot.
Yeah.
Okay. What seems crazy is that he did not go into the church or get a photo with the clergy of that church, who it turns out were horrified by what happened.
Right.
And wasn't one of them chased off with the tear gas?
Yes. Yeah. They had been offering refuge to protesters. And they were chased out of that church, and so Trump could show up. On the outside, he didn't go in. It's so weird.
And he didn't make any motion that looked like prayer. He didn't do any of the things.
Or invite one of the clergy to come, be in the photo op.
Exactly.
And say, we want to make sure everyone's safe, or do anything that a sane fucking person would do.
And he didn't have a verse selected to read, which any other president with a functioning communication shop would have done. He just held the Bible like a totem for several seconds and then walked back to the White House.
Yeah.
So the good news is that this photo op seems to have been a massive misfire and is blown up in his face. Several aides initially claimed credit for the stunt, and then as it fell apart during the course of the day, they all distanced themselves. However, I am not entirely certain that this was a misfire, because I am still trying to figure out what was being communicated in that moment. Trump holding up a book that he has obviously never read high over his head in front of a church he's only been to on his inauguration day is funny to us, but we were not the intended audience. So let's dive into that, let's start with the obvious. Many people have called Trump hypocritical because he's personally so antithetical to what the Bible says, and certainly to the example of Jesus Christ, who said things like, quote, "Blessed are the peacemakers," or "Whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek. And love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you," right?
Fag.
Right.
In that narrow context,
gay.
right?
By the way, it's a gay guy saying that, okay? I just want everybody to know it was the gay guy that said that. Go on.
In that narrow context, okay, Trump is a monumental hypocrite. But Jesus is not the only character in the Bible. And in fact, there are several that are very well Trump-like. Like take King David, for example. In just one story of many that we talked about back in episode 40 in the book of Samuel, King David kidnaps, rapes, and impregnates a woman named Bathsheba. When he finds out she's pregnant, he eventually arranges for her husband to be killed by the military. That sounds pretty Trumpy to me. And of course, for every verse that extols peace and kindness, there are several that justify violence, rape, and slavery. So let's leave aside the hypocrisy issue. Besides the Christians that support Trump of long ago either justified that support somehow or simply shut off that part of their brain anyway. So again, what was it that Trump and those around him were trying to say in that moment? And I do think those are two different things. Trump has obviously never read the Bible, and not being a church-going man, he is not educated or savvy in the the doctrines or mythologies of evangelical Christianity.
Or even how you say the names of the books.
Truly.
Yeah.
2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians.
Boom.
Boom, that's the whole ball game.
Bada
Bing.
So I think for Trump, he was trying to have a show of force, show he wasn't cowering in his bunker, and also, wave to his Bible-thumping followers. What's also weird about this whole affair, and this is where it gets, to my mind, starts getting very dark, is who accompanied if it hasn't already.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is where it gets dark. Okay.
This takes a turn, huh?
It's weird.
You never see it coming.
Yeah. It's weird who did and did not accompany him. So Mike Pence was not there, and I don't know why. I would try to figure out if he was traveling or... But of all the people...
It smells like Pence to me.
Right?
Well, go on.
Yeah,
on.
Of all the people that you'd think would be just down to clown for this kind of bullshit, it's Mike Pence. Right. But he was accompanied by Attorney General William Barr, Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, and even Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley in full battle rattle, no less, decked out in his camo. So the law and the military, which again, I don't believe is a coincidence, were accompanying him to this event.
Right.
Right. So as I thought about what this was meant to communicate and who it was being communicated to, I kept thinking about a book that Chris Hedges wrote in 2007 called American Fascists, the Christian Right and the War on America. Now, before anyone asks me, I know that Hedges has said some problematic things about atheism and atheists, but I don't know if either of you ever read that book, but what he wrote 13 years ago about Christian fascism and what we're seeing today is...
In War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning?
No, it's in Christian American Fascists.
Oh, I didn't read that one. I read War is a Force.
Yeah, and that's a good book. War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning is a great book about why not just America, but humanity can't seem to get away from war, and we treat it almost like a civic religion. But in and Hedges is a pastor or minister of some kind, I forget. But he predicted that if fascists were to return to America, they wouldn't be in jackboots; they would be carrying they would be bearing crosses. Right. So I'm going to read some quotes from his book that really get to kind of this moment. So, quote: "The radical Christian right calls for exclusion, cruelty, and intolerance in the name of God. Its members do not commit evil for evil's sake; they commit evil to make a better world. To attain this better world, they believe, some must suffer and be silenced, and at the end of time, all those who oppose them must be destroyed. The worst suffering in human history has been carried out by those who preach such grand utopian visions, those who seek to implant by force their narrow, particular version of goodness." He goes on, "Some human beings," the message goes, "are no longer human beings. They are types. This new, exclusive community fosters rigidity, conformity, and intolerance. In this new binary world, segments of the human race are disqualified from moral and ethical consideration. And because fundamentalist followers live in a binary universe, they are incapable of seeing others as anything more than inverted reflections of themselves. If they seek to destroy non-believers to create a Christian America, then non-believers must be seeking to destroy them. This belief system negates the possibility of an ethical life." And I'll read one more small one, and this one really kind of gets to the nut. "Blind adherence to an absolute leader, especially one who permits violence, hands followers a license to unleash hidden, prohibited lusts and passions usually kept locked within the human heart. It permits followers to kill in the name of God." And that is what I think fundamentally was being communicated by that photo op.
Yeah, he was definitely communicating, like, look, he's openly calling for the military to go out in this. Right before he held up that Bible, he said, "I will dispatch the military to states and take care of the problem if the governors won't."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The governors that he called, what did he call them? Dummies or something? Jerks?
Yeah, something like that.
While he's hiding in his bunker, that he's openly calling for military belligerence. Of course, he's covertly calling or semi-covertly calling for the meatheads and the sovereign citizens and all the yahoos with their guns to do, to rid him of this infernal priest, right?
Yeah,
right.
And that's why I think it's fascinating that it doesn't seem like what he did had anything to do with anything that was actually in the Bible.
No.
Good or bad.
No.
It was...
No, he wasn't even referencing the book. He was
Correct.
it was just a dog whistle.
A dog
It was
whistle.
a shibboleth. It was.
Yes.
He's using the Bible as its writers intended as a weapon.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and when you color in the context that this stunt was taking place as uniformed but unidentified paramilitary forces were violently putting down nonviolent protests of racism and police brutality, the message becomes fucking terrifying. I believe Trump was signaling to his heavily armed, hyper-Christian base, particularly those in the police and also in unofficial militias, that the time has come. And that he, the U.S. legal system, and the military have got their backs. And, if that was the case, then I don't know if this stunt was a misfire. I guess it remains to be seen if the message is picked up by those it was intended to.
If it was meant to, Doug, I think, to try to attract more voters from this broad nation to his cause, it's a misfire.
Yeah, but I don't believe it was.
If it was intended to activate irregulars to subvert democracy to keep him in power, I think it was as intended. And remember, Mike Pence isn't the only radical evangelical Christian in his midst.
Yeah,
Right.
Pompeo and Barr are also kind of end times Christian radicals. So the most powerful people around. I don't know what Esper, his latest in 25 secretaries of defense, what his religious thing is. But he's surrounded by religious fanatics.
Yeah.
And even if he doesn't get what makes them tick, he knows that those people will vote for him. So he'll hold up whatever they hand him.
Exactly. And I think please go.
I think, Doug, that I don't share your optimism that Trump thinks that clearly. I
didn't mean to say that he did. I hear you.
I think that there are people around him that may want that message to get out. But
Fully agree.
But Trump himself cares about Trump.
Right.
And that's literally the only thing I've ever seen him conclusively care about.
And the only thing I would quibble with in that is that if the message was explained to him that, sir, hold this book up, and he said why, and they said, well, it's gonna help perpetuate violence.
Yeah, he
would have held it higher. Yeah.
He doesn't care. If they handed him a fucking beach ball, he would have held it up. If they told him that would get him solidify his base.
I honestly think that it was. I don't go as dark as you do, Doug. To me, there are plenty of other reasons why, like, dopey Americans are putting on Hawaiian shirts and yelling boogaloo, and I don't think that Trump holding a Bible is one of them. To me, I think that Trump holding a Bible was literally my best guess, and all we're doing here is best guesses.
Yeah.
None of us have any secret insight, and QAnon has stopped taking my phone calls, so I don't know really what's going on.
Well, why does he need to take your phone calls when he's listening to them anyway?
Right, exactly. Because he then went on to he and Melania went to a Catholic shrine and did the creepiest photo ops there.
Which is saying
again,
something.
alone, just the two of them.
And the Archbishop of Washington was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, but literally. And it's another one in the long line of videos where he tries to take her hand. If you watch the video, it's so creepy. They're in front of a giant statue of Pope John Paul II.
It's actually life size. He was 12 feet tall.
He was a 15-foot tall man. And
second tallest pope.
Donald goes to after Pope Longshanks III.
After Pope Dunkanator.
Pope the Stilt Chamberlain.
Pope Meta World Peace.
Trump goes to take Melania's hand, and there are lots of videos where she swats his hand away. This one, she just jerks like her arm's having a bit of a seizure, but he's holding on tight enough that, like, forcing her to. It's creepy and crazy and whatever, but I think he's just trying to. It's the clumsiest thing in the world, but I honestly think all he's trying to do is reach out to his his religious voters.
I don't disagree.
Are turning their back on him.
I think
you're both right. I think his Stephen Miller and the shitbags around him have peppered his language with shibboleths to the QAnon people, right, to keep them excited. Like 17 Democrats, and 17 is important to them, and all these stupid fucking fringe garbage things. So I don't put it past them to do anything to try to foment unrest and chaos, because I think that's all. He sees that as his only way to retain power.
And I think the context matters so much here, because he didn't do this 6 months ago. He didn't do this after a mass shooting somewhere. Mm-hmm. He literally has been extolling governors to crack down on their populations. He's bringing prison guards into Washington D.C. to beat up peaceful protesters, and in the midst of all of that, and then calling for more violence, he goes and holds up a Bible in front of a church. I just don't.
After having peaceful protesters attacked before they even had the
curfew
imprimatur of curfew. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, they didn't even ask them to leave.
No,
they just
attacked.
Started gassing. Now, there's one thing that I wanted to bring up, because Doug, you were talking about because somebody mentioned, I think Mark, you mentioned chaos and how this is sowing chaos, and Doug, you were talking about all of the different advisors that sort of did and didn't take credit for this. There's one advisor that you haven't mentioned that's in Trump's inner circle that he made a phone call to immediately preceding this event that I think might
American
be the answer.
American President Vladimir Putin.
Correct. I think
Yep.
that maybe this is literally just a chaos moment from a really savvy ex-KGB agent to try as a psyop against the United States of America.
Here's the thing. I don't know which of all of these options is the better one.
Right. None of them are good.
And all of them could be true. And this is the problem with such a dysfunctional fucking situation.
Right.
Is even guys like us that love to criticize and drill into conspiracy theories are wading into this swamp. You know, it's so dysfunctional and so incoherent that it's a fucking Rorschach test. We can paint anything we want into this madness.
Yeah.
So this is my theory, which is mine. But
Yes.
I just, I saw him holding up that Bible, and of course, people have put up the pictures of Ahmadinejad holding up a Quran, or Saddam Hussein holding up a Quran, or Hitler holding up a Bible. And
That was Photoshopped, by the way.
the Hitler in the Bible.
No,
Hitler Bible.
there's one picture that was photoshopped that's Hitler holding
That was
the Bible
a similar pose.
in exactly the same pose. But there are
Yeah.
plenty of pictures of Hitler holding up a Bible.
And, and those are, of
for
course, apt comparisons, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, of course, Trump doesn't know the historical context or anything like that. Duh. But, would anyone listening to my voice believe that he wouldn't encourage militia violence if it were to keep him in the White House and out of prison?
I don't think so for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I agree. Or maybe the simplest answer is he thought there was a cheeseburger in it.
Wait,
Or at least someone told him there would be.
he was so disappointed.
Yeah, so disappointed.
So, I don't want to. Let me just end with this. Look, this can be fixed. We need to vote this motherfucker out. There's a lot more to do than just that, but fuck, we need to start with that.
Yeah.
And remember, for people who are like, well, what's the difference between the candidate A and candidate B? You don't even think about Trump so much. Think about all the people that made that moment happen. Jared, Ivanka, Pence, Pompeo, Barr, Stephen Miller.
Carson.
When he goes, they go.
Yep.
If you can't think about anything else, think about the whole fucking rogues gallery of monsters and slobberers that surround this piece of shit. So
That's
an endorsement.
yeah. So with that, why don't we get out of this hole I've dug?
Yeah, let's run from the not tear gas.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, moving on.